Hi, I'm Kristen, and today I'll be revisiting the topic of raising experiencer children. So, over the past few weeks, my kids have been coming to me more frequently, and they've been mentioning different types of paranormal, strange, kind of like woo experiences that they've been having. And I realized that the way that I was reacting to my children and responding to what they were telling me was different from how I would have even responded, let's say 6 months to 12 months ago. So I figured I would jump on here and I would kind of mention what's changed and why I'm thinking about their experiences differently so that they can be more open about them in the future and possibly have their gifts develop even more than they're developed now. Um, so jumping back to about 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, I was getting my children ready for bed, and my son was about to brush his teeth, and he made a comment to me that didn't really stick out to him, but it stuck out a lot to me, and it was like a big synchronicity, I suppose. So my son is 6 years old, and he asked me out of the blue, "Is it true that as soon as we're born, we start dying?" And obviously that sounds very mature. It's very strange for a little kid to say something like that. But what's even stranger is that I had heard almost that exact same question earlier in the afternoon. Um, so I am a stay-at-home mom, and I pick up my kids from school every day. And so I wait outside of the school in my car and just wait for the bell to ring for them to come outside. So while I was sitting in my car, I turned on just like a religious radio station, and a sermon had just been starting when I turned it on, just kind of fill the time, I suppose. And the preacher that was on the radio, he was saying, like, today I'm going to talk about death in the Bible. And he was kind of going on and on about how he personally thinks of death, and how we've changed the way as a society of how we think of death. And so he was talking about like younger people feel like they're never going to die. And even if other young people are dying in motorcycle accidents, like that won't be me. And he mentioned like how we try to make death seem pretty or um, more formal than it actually is. And he mentioned like we call caskets coffins now, and instead of calling gravestones that, we call them monuments now, and everything is just kind of um, a way to sanitize what death is actually like and how hard it is. And before he kind of moved into the rest of his sermon, where he was talking about how death is described in the Bible, he said, as soon as we're born, we start dying." And so that question kind of stuck out in my head of like I never heard a preacher talk about that from that perspective before. But then 2 hours later, the same day, hear my young son say the exact same thing. It was so bizarre, it was so weird. And so he brushed his teeth, and after he was finished doing that, I was like, "Well, like, can you tell me again, like, why did you say that comment about dying?" And he said, like, "I don't know what I said. I don't know why I said that." And so it was almost like he had gotten a download, or he just something popped into his head that made him say it, and he didn't even know what it meant. He didn't know where it came from. He didn't even have any thoughts around it. So that was really bizarre. And I told him, it's like, well, I just heard the guy like on the church radio station saying exactly what you just said. It's so strange. And he said, something else happened too. He was like, that was really strange. And I said, well, what was it? And he said, "Do you remember when we were walking through the dining room and you were holding my hand, but I let go of your hand so that I could kick a ball and then I fell?" And I said, "No, I don't remember that. My son is very bouncing off the walls, and he falls a lot, just because he's running, jumping, skipping, and all that." And so even though I didn't remember the incident, he said, "I dreamt about it the night before." And I said, like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I dreamt about holding your hand, and I let go of your hand, and I went to kick the ball, and I fell." And he said, I knew it in my dream, essentially." And he said his dreams are warnings. And he was like, "They warn me." And I asked him, I was like, "Well, did you have other dreams that kind of happened, or like you saw something in your dream before it ended up coming true?" And he said yes. And I said, "Well, what were all of those?" And he couldn't remember. So that was quite odd. So now there's kind of like this aspect going on in his life of he's having premonitions, and yeah, it's quite strange. And just even around the same time period, just other strange things coming up related to my son. Like we were driving down the street, and um, he was saying like, "Oh, I know somebody in there," and he was talking about like the local graveyard. And I was like, "Well, that's very strange. Like I don't know if that's true." I was like, "You mean from another life?" And he said, "Yeah," and kind of wrote that off. And I still don't know if there's any kind of truth to that, or it's just a kid making up stories. Um, but in that same vein of talking about other lives, like he's also said to me in the past month, like, I remember when my other dad taught me how to build a fire. And I said, like, what other dad? What other dad do you have? And he was like before this one, like before I was who I am. And so just all of these things have been coming at me a million miles an hour, just so many things happening. Um, but back to kind of like the original story, like the night that my son was telling me about, um, as soon as we're born, do we start dying? And he started telling me about the kind of premonition dream. My daughter jumped in and then she said, like, I had something weird happen too. And I asked her, like, well, what was that? And she said, like, before, this was like a year ago, like I was laying in bed and um, I saw that there were like these numbers on the ceiling, and like they were all like there were certain numbers in one corner, like above my bed, and then on the opposite corner of the room, like they were all in a jumble. And I was like, that's really strange. And at that point, I was just like thinking that she was just probably very sleepy and she didn't know what she was seeing. It's bizarre. But then she said, but I saw something different in your room, like your bedroom. And I said, well, what did you see in my room? And she said, oh, one night I went in there and I saw like all of these squares all interconnected. And I was like everywhere. She was like, yeah, well, she's like all over the entire ceiling. And she said they were like glowing blue lines and they connected. And she was like, as I looked down, there were more squares and more squares. And so I asked her to make a drawing of it, and she said, I don't know what that was. And I said, well, I know what that was. It's the grid. I mean, so many people have mentioned having meditations or going out of body, or um, just being completely awake and lucid, and seeing kind of like this grid pattern made of squares or hexagons, or triangles, even just something that's interconnecting kind of all of reality in front of us. And so my daughter has had other kind of telepathic um, contact, and so I thought, well, I guess that makes sense that she would be the first one in our family to really like see the grid in front of her. Um, and then cut to 2 days ago, my son was again getting ready for bed. He was laying down, and he told me like, "Mommy, I can hear God talking to me." And I said, well, like, what's he saying? And I don't think he could really make it out. He could just hear a voice. And I said, well, what does the voice say, or what does it sound like? And he said, sounds like a boy, except it's really low, or like he was like it's quiet. Um, and so again, it's this kind of goes back to like this biblical idea of like the small, still, quiet voice is the voice of God. And so I told him, I was like, well, I was like, if you can hear whatever he's saying, I was like, can I ask him a question? And my son said yes. And so I said, well, I'm going to think of a number, just any number. It could be big, it could be small. And I was like, I'm going to think it. And I was like, let's see if God will tell you what the number is that I'm thinking of. And he said, okay. And he was getting excited about doing that. And so waited maybe 4 or 5 seconds. And my son said, I heard 40. And I was thinking of the number 47. I was just thinking like 47, 47. And so out of all of the numbers in all the world, again, like you would think a 6-year-old would think of a number between like 1 and 10. Or I don't even know what he would what he would think of beyond that, but I was not expecting him to think of a number in the 40s. But he either heard himself the 40, or God told him 40 and he heard that part of the number. But I thought that was pretty wild, and I wasn't expecting him to come anywhere near the number that I was thinking. And so obviously it's like, of course it's a guess. Maybe he just guessed correctly that it was that 40 was in the number, or I don't know, he was just like picking it up from the ether or something. But I've chosen to believe that he was hearing something, and it kind of aligned with what I was thinking. And so with all of this going on, I'm just thinking like I've been having a lot of contact in my dreams. Now my kids are having all this contact. It just seems like especially since 2026 has started, it's just so many experiencers are getting new downloads, kind of new experiences, like bigger experiences, and it seems like it's just going to keep ramping up more and more and more, and it's not going to die down. It's going to get kind of more profound. And so, with that in mind, I know that in the first video that I made about raising experiencer children, that I was just saying, just like be really open to listening to your kids and hearing what they have to say. Don't tell them like what you saw isn't real, or what you saw is this or that. I mean, when it comes to like non-human intelligence and like who we're getting messages from and what we're seeing, like we really don't have the answers. Like they can project images to us that are not what they actually look like. They can have us think things or receive messages that might not necessarily be true. Like everything is kind of very confusing. You don't know what's what. So the way that I've been approaching this now is to go beyond just listening and not making any judgments about what it is that they're seeing or hearing, but now also like kind of reaching back into the experience and seeing what they can do with it. So when my daughter told me about the grid, I kind of told her like, yeah, other people have seen that. Like I haven't, but other people have. And I'm telling her like, well, if you see it again, like let me know that it happens, and then like look closer and try to see more, see what it's like. What does it look like it's made out of? Is it made out of lasers? Is it made out of plasma? Like, does it kind of come in and out like it's a projection or something? Um, and like I said to my son, it's like, well, if you're hearing a voice, like respond back, ask a question, see if the question that is, or the answer that is given to you to the question, if it's relevant, if it applies. So when it comes to things like CE5 and just like reaching out into the abyss and trying to contact something, anything, you don't know what it is that's going to be responding, like I do not recommend that. And a lot of other kind of experts in this field don't recommend that either. But when you already have something that's communicating with you and that is already coming in kind of a benevolent to neutral kind of manner, it's already there. I would say like try to get as much information as you can, interact with it. Because it's there for a reason. It's not just showing up just to say like hello and goodbye and just make an appearance and be gone, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Like these beings are here because we're meant to be interacting with them, and we're meant to gain something from their presence being in our lives. So yeah, I guess as time goes on, we'll see if my children are able to have more interactions, kind of think back to whatever messages they're receiving and see what kind of answers they're getting. Again, because contact is picking up so dramatically for so many people, I feel like it's going to snowball. This seems like a major year. Maybe the next few years are a major time of like ascension or awakening or whatever people want to call it. But there's obviously something really really big going on, and I think that this phenomena is going to be a bigger part of like our actual day-to-day lives, and something that we're kind of dealing with as we're going about our days. So yeah, if you have any other questions for me about kind of what my kids have been going through, or how you would tackle certain specific situations with your own children, please let me know and I'll get back to you. So thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.